Good evening. I'm Captain Marcus Brooks. After 28 years in the skies, I thought I'd seen every kind of passenger. I was wrong. Tonight's story is about a woman who wanted nothing but sleep, and an emergency that had other plans for her. This is the story of Flight 619. The overhead chime didn't wake her. It was the shift in engine pitch, a low, unnatural whine that shouldn't happen cruising over the Sierra Nevada at 36,000 feet. Captain Naomi Reyes pressed her forehead against the cold window of seat 22C, trying to let the drone of the engines pull her under. She was exhausted in a way sleep alone couldn't fix. The kind of fatigue that settles into your bones after 11 months flying C-17 Globemasters into forward airfields in the dark, hauling cargo and wounded soldiers through weather no sane pilot would choose. Her body was home now, technically, sitting in coach on a red-eye from Denver to Sacramento. Her nervous system hadn't gotten the message. Every clatter from the beverage cart, every sharp cough from a nearby passenger sent a small jolt of adrenaline through her that she was too tired to fight off. She'd grown up the daughter of a crop duster pilot in the Central Valley, learning to read a horizon line before she learned to read a stop sign. She'd joined the Air Force at 18, flown transport her entire career because the recruiter had told her transport pilots were the backbone of every operation nobody wrote songs about. Steady, unglamorous, essential. She believed that. She'd built a career on believing that. Right now, all she wanted was 4 hours of unconsciousness and a hot shower on the other end of it. The cabin lights were dimmed to a deep blue twilight. Beside her in 22B, a man in a rumpled polo had tried making conversation earlier, eyeing the olive-drab duffel wedged under her seat. "Military?" he'd asked in the tone people use when they want a story but don't want to work for it. Naomi had given a tight nod and put her headphones on. She wasn't in the mood to explain cargo ramp procedures to a stranger on a Tuesday night. She'd finally drifted off when the aircraft dropped. It wasn't a bump, it was a fall, a stomach into throat plunge that slammed every passenger against their belts. Someone screamed. Overhead bins rattled violently, one popping open and spilling a backpack into the aisle. A drink cart, unsecured somewhere behind first class, crashed sideways with a metallic shriek. Clear air turbulence. Naomi's brain registered instantly, the assessment arriving before she was even fully conscious. It happens. You hit a jet stream, sheer, the plane drops a few hundred feet, the wings find lift again. The recovery is firm and clean. This recovery wasn't clean. The left wing dipped hard, an uncoordinated wobbling bank that slid passengers against their armrests. Then the nose pitched up too aggressively, engines surging to catch the lost airspeed. The Airbus A321 wallowed like something had gone badly wrong with the hands flying it. Heavy, sloppy, the way a car feels when a tire's about to blow. Naomi sat up straight, scanning the tilted horizon through the window. The lights of a small town far below tilted at a nauseating angle before leveling unevenly out. "What are they doing up there?" the man in 22B muttered, gripping his armrest white-knuckled. "Overcorrecting," Naomi whispered, almost without meaning to say it out loud. There was no reassuring PA announcement. No "sorry folks, hit some rough air," just the drone of engines and 200 passengers' nervous murmuring, growing louder, more frightened, feeding on itself the way fear does in an enclosed space with nowhere to go. Then the chime. Ding ding, the emergency intercom signal. 10 seconds later the PA crackled, not the calm baritone of a captain, but a young woman's voice, breathless, cracking with barely controlled panic. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the lead flight attendant. We are experiencing a medical emergency in the flight deck. If there are any military pilots on board, please ring your call button." The cabin went completely silent. Even the crying baby 2 rows back seemed to hold its breath. Naomi stared at the seatback in front of her. "No, absolutely not. I fly cargo. I don't know the first thing about an Airbus. Its systems, its handling, anything." She waited 5 seconds. 10. No one else moved. No amber light lit anywhere in the cabin. The plane banked again, sloppy and shuddering, the engines surging in a delayed, desperate correction that told her whoever was up there was losing slowly and steadily the fight against the aircraft's own mass. She let out a long breath and reached up, pressed the button. The amber light above 22C blinked on like a spotlight. The man beside her stared. "You're a pilot?" "Air Force," Naomi said flatly, unbuckling. "Let me out." She stepped into the aisle just as a young flight attendant burst through the forward curtain, coffee stain down her blouse. Name tag reading MIA, eyes wide with terror. "You," Mia's voice cracked. "Captain Naomi Reyes. I fly C-17s. What's the situation?" She kept her voice low level. Panic was contagious. Calm, she'd learned a long time ago, could be too, if you offered it with enough conviction. Mia grabbed her wrist, a total breach of protocol that said everything about how desperate things had become, and pulled her forward. First class was a gallery of frozen, wide-eyed faces, drinks abandoned on trays, a man still gripping his seatbelt buckle like it might come loose on its own. Naomi didn't look at any of them. Her mind was already compartmentalizing, shutting the tired civilian passenger down, booting the officer back up the way she'd trained herself to do 100 times before a mission brief. At the cockpit door stood the purser, an older man whose face had gone the color of wet ash, his hand still resting on the heavy internal phone he'd just hung up. "This is Naomi," Mia said. "Air Force." The purser's eyes flicked over her jeans, a plain t-shirt, hair pulled back, messy from sleep. Not exactly what he'd pictured when he'd hoped someone would answer that call. "We hit severe clear air turbulence," he said tight-lipped, forcing the words out fast. "Flight crew was off harness, dinner service. The captain took the impact against the overhead panel. He's unresponsive, breathing, but not answering. First officer's arm is broken, badly. I think he's flying manual, left-handed, and he's going into shock. I can hear it in his voice. A broken arm and shock at 36,000 feet, flying a 180,000-pound aircraft with one hand. The sloppy banking, the delayed corrections, it all made horrible, immediate sense now. "Open the door." The purser punched the code with trembling fingers. The heavy cockpit door clanked open, and the noise hit first a shrieking, repetitive master caution alarm, red and amber strobing violently across the glass panels. Then the smell, copper and cold sweat, sharp enough to catch in the back of the throat. The captain, a man named Harris, gray-haired, was slumped against his harness, a gash bleeding down his forehead onto his white collar. The first officer, younger, maybe 35, had gone pale as paper, his right arm hanging at a sickening angle against his side, his left hand locked, white-knuckled on the side stick, breath coming in short, ragged gasps. "Sir, look at me." He didn't hear her. He flinched at something on the screen in front of him, the aircraft dipping left in response. Naomi caught herself on the jump seat and slapped her palm flat against the glare shield directly in his line of sight. "I'm Captain Naomi Reyes, U.S. Air Force. I fly transport aircraft. I'm taking the seat. I've got you. Trims. I can't reach the trim wheel," he gasped, his eyes finally focusing on her face for half a second before sliding back to the instruments. "I know. Hold for 10 seconds. She turned to the purser, hovering in the doorway. "Get the captain out. Now." It was ugly, dragging the unconscious man backward over the console, one arm catching on the throttle quadrant, blood smearing across Naomi's forearm as they hauled him into the galley between them. The purser sealed the door behind them, and the sound of the cabin muffled voices and someone sobbing disappeared. Naomi slid into the captain's seat. It felt too big, molded for a body that wasn't hers. The side stick was alien under her hand. No yoke here, just a small joystick beside the seat, a completely different logic from anything she'd trained on in 12 years of flying. She strapped the harness tight until it dug into her collarbones. The pressure grounded her, gave her something solid to feel besides the shaking in her own hands. "I have the aircraft," she said. "You have the aircraft." The first officer repeated the old training phrase, coming out of him automatically even now, and the relief in his voice as he said it nearly broke him. He let go of the stick, slumping back, cradling his shattered arm against his ribs, eyes fluttering shut. "Aviate, navigate, communicate. First aviate." The artificial horizon showed 12 degrees right bank, nose pitched up, 4 airspeed bleeding away fast. She eased the side stick left and forward feeding in power with her right hand. The aircraft answered with unfamiliar sluggishness, different mass, different feel than anything she knew, like fighting a much larger animal that hadn't decided yet whether to trust her. She leveled the wings, let speed build back to something reasonable, silenced the shrieking master caution with a firm slap of her palm. Silence crashed into the cockpit, save for wind noise, and the first officer's ragged, shallow breathing beside her. She found the radio, checked the placard beneath the panel for the frequency, and keyed the push-to-talk switch. "Sacramento Center, this is Flight 619 declaring an emergency. Both flight crew incapacitated. I am a non-revenue military pilot. I've taken the controls. I need a company pilot on frequency. I have 0 hours in an Airbus airframe." A pause. Then a controller's calm, deliberate voice, the kind trained specifically for moments like this one. "Copy 619, standing by for a company pilot. What's your background, Captain?" "C-17 Globemaster, roughly 1900 hours. Never touched an Airbus in my life, not even in a simulator." The radio crackled again, a new voice cutting through, older, unhurried, steeped in decades of low-altitude problem-solving. "Flight 619, this is Captain Diane Okafor, Skyline Flight Standards. I hear we've got Air Force in the left seat today. That's affirmative, Naomi said. Talk fast, Captain. I'm out of my depth up here and I know it. First things first, let's get the autopilot flying for you. Take some of the weight off your hands. Look dead center on your glare shield. See a button labeled AP1? Naomi scanned the unfamiliar panel, eyes jumping between dozens of switches she'd never touched in her life. I see it. Make sure the stick's neutral, altitude and heading look stable, then press it. She did. A green light clicked on. The heavy resistance in the stick vanished, instantly replaced by rigid mechanical stillness, as the autopilot locked the aircraft onto its current heading and altitude, holding it steady, the way nothing in the last 10 minutes had been steady. Naomi exhaled hard, forearms burning hands, trembling now that they had nothing left to fight. Autopilot's engaged. Good work. Genuinely good work. How's your first officer doing? She glanced right. He'd deteriorated fast, skin gone gray, clammy, gleaming with cold sweat, breath shallow and rapid, the shock from his shattered arm overtaking his whole body. He's fading, needs trauma medics the second we're on the ground. I'm single pilot up here, and I need you to understand that clearly. Understood completely. We are vectoring you to Sacramento International, runway 16 right. 12,000 feet of dry concrete, more than enough room. Descending you to 10,000 now. What's the weather down there? A pause that told her the answer before it came. Overcast, 800-foot ceiling, 2 miles, visibility, light rain. Naomi swore under her breath. 800 feet meant flying blind through cloud on instruments alone, until seconds before touchdown. No heads-up display, no visor projection like her Globemaster's cockpit gave her, just raw glass screens and a set of numbers that meant nothing to her yet. Normally we'd have you program an auto land, Okafor said, reading the length of her silence correctly. But walking you through unfamiliar flight management menus right now is too risky. One wrong keystroke and you could dump the flight plan entirely, or worse. We're doing this the old way. Air traffic control gives you headings and altitudes. You dial them into the panel. The plane flies them. When you break out of the clouds, you disconnect and hand fly the flare yourself. Can you do that? I can do that. It was a necessary lie the kind pilots tell themselves and everyone around them when the alternative is worse. She had no real idea how this heavy, unfamiliar aircraft would handle at low speed, close to the ground, with a crosswind pushing against it. The purser knocked once and eased the door open, holding out a small paper cup of water with shaking hands. Captain Harris is stable, vitals holding. He hasn't woken up, though. He glanced past her at the instrument panel, uncomprehending, then back at her face. The passengers know something's wrong. They can feel the descent. It's steeper than usual, and words traveling back through the cabin fast. Tell them the truth, Naomi said, downing the water in one gulp, her throat painfully dry. Both pilots down, a military pilot's flying. We're landing in 20 minutes. Nobody moves, nobody panics. Brace positions if it comes to that. But tell them the truth. They'll smell a lie faster than they'll accept bad news, honestly given. The purser nodded once sharply and sealed the door again, leaving her alone with the unconscious first officer and the low electronic hum of the cooling fans. The altimeter unwound steadily. 20,000 feet. 15. At 12,000, the clear sky vanished entirely into thick gray cloud, and rain began streaking sideways across the windshield in long silver lines. Vertigo pulled hard at the edges of Naomi's vision, a physical, nauseating sensation, her inner ear insisting they were turning left, banking away from the runway, while her eyes on the instruments told her flatly they were level and on course. She'd felt this exact illusion before, over the Atlantic in weather that grounded lesser pilots, and she knew the only cure for it. Trust the scan. Attitude, airspeed, altitude, heading. Trust the instruments over your own body, every single time, because your body is lying to you right now, and the instruments aren't. Flight 619, Sacramento approach. Turn left heading 180, descend and maintain 4,000. She dialed it in, watching the aircraft bank sluggishly through the gray void outside. Nothing visible but rushing wisps of cloud and the occasional flash of her own wingtip lights reflecting back at her. She glanced at the first officer beside her, eyes closed now, chest barely rising, his skin gone the color of old wax. She reached over and tapped his knee, hoping for some flicker of response. Nothing. She was completely alone in that cockpit, in a way she hadn't been alone in a very long time. No wingman, no loadmaster calling out checklist items behind her, just her own hands, and a voice on the radio belonging to a woman she'd never met and would probably never see face to face. Flight 619, you're 5 miles from the marker. Reduced to 160 knots, gear down, flaps 30. She pulled the flap lever back into the detent, feeling the hydraulics groan somewhere deep in the wings as heavy panels extended into the slipstream. She grabbed the gear handle and pushed it down. Thud. 3 green lights bloomed on the panel. Gear down and locked. The drag hit the airframe immediately, hard and sudden. The auto throttle surged to compensate the engine note climbing. "You're on the glide path," Okafor's voice said, steady as ever. "Listen carefully because this is the part that matters most. You're trained to fly a controlled descent right into the deck, a hard, stabilized touchdown. Do not do that here. This isn't a cargo ramp. You need to flare. Arrest the sink rate in the last few feet before touchdown gently, or you'll shear the main gear clean off the wings." Understood. Her jaw ached with the tension she hadn't noticed building in it. The altimeter read 1,200 feet. Still nothing but featureless gray outside the glass. 900. 800, and the clouds shredded apart all at once, tearing open like curtains. The ground rushed up beneath her wet suburban rooftops. A highway choked with the red smear of brake lights. A scattering of dark pine trees. Dead ahead, flanked by violently strobing approach lights, runway 16 right. A wet gray ribbon in the rain. "Runway in sight," Naomi transmitted her voice, tighter than she wanted it to be. "Disconnect the autopilot. She's all yours, Captain." She pressed the disconnect. A sharp alarm blared, warning the automation was gone. She silenced it, and the full weight of the aircraft transferred into her hands. Crosswind slammed the fuselage. The nose drifted right. She fought it with rudder, dipping the wing against the wind. 500, the automated voice called. Too high, she eased the throttles back a hair. 400, the runway threshold rushed up. 300, rain blinding wipers thumping. 200, 100, 50. "Flare now," Okafor said. Naomi hauled the stick back, pulling thrust to idle. The aircraft floated suspended for an eternity, eating up runway. Then the main gear hit a hard, teeth-rattling crack that shot up her spine. A terrifying secondary bounce, then the weight settled. She drove the nose gear down, threw the spoilers up, pulled the reverse thrust levers. The engines howled, deceleration, slamming her against the harness boots, hard on the brakes. 100 knots, 80, 60. At 30 she eased off reverse. The roaring stopped, just the rhythmic thump of tires over centerline lights. She brought the aircraft to a full, shuddering stop on the taxiway and pulled the parking brake. Silence. Absolute ringing silence, save for rain drumming the glass. Naomi let go of the stick. Her hands were locked into claws, forearms twitching. Not fear, the adrenaline finally leaving her system, all at once, leaving nothing but hollow exhaustion. "Flight 619, the tower said, voice unexpectedly gentle. "Fire and rescue approaching from your right. Welcome to Sacramento, Captain." The cockpit door burst open. Mia stood there, tears streaming down her face, and behind her, the roar of 200 passengers, cheering, sobbing, clapping, a sound that seemed to come from every direction at once, human and ragged and enormous. Paramedics flooded in within minutes, moving with practiced urgency, securing the first officer's neck, hauling him carefully from the seat on a backboard. Another team worked on Captain Harris in the galley, someone calling out vitals in short, clipped sentences. Naomi stood flattened against the bulkhead, out of the way, watching the flurry of yellow jackets move through a space that had been 10 minutes earlier entirely and terrifyingly hers alone. Her hands hadn't fully stopped shaking. One paramedic, an older woman with a radio strapped to her chest, paused on her way past, taking in Naomi's rumpled jeans, the blood streaked dark across her t-shirt, the complete absence of any pilot's uniform. "You flew this thing down?" Naomi looked out at the rain-soaked tarmac, flashing red and blue lights, painting slow arcs across the windshield. Somewhere, hundreds of miles away, her globemaster sat quiet on a flight line. At Travis understood, down to every rivet and switch, nothing at all like the strange, sluggish giant she'd just wrestled out of the sky. She managed a tired, crooked smile. Guy in 22B needed to make his connection. Mia found her a few minutes later, standing near the jet bridge, and without a word, wrapped her arms around Naomi in a hug that neither of them had planned. "I didn't think anyone was going to press that button," Mia admitted quietly into her shoulder. "I stood there announcing it, and for a second, I really thought nobody would." "I almost didn't," Naomi admitted. "I told myself someone else would." "I'm glad you didn't wait to find out," Mia said. Naomi grabbed her duffel bag, slung it over an aching shoulder, and walked off the aircraft into the Sacramento rain, past a line of exhausted, grateful passengers who reached out to touch her arm as she passed, murmuring thanks she didn't quite know how to receive. That's the story of Flight 619. Naomi Reyes didn't know a single switch on that aircraft 20 minutes before she landed it. She'd never touched an Airbus side stick, never studied its systems, never once imagined she'd be the one talking a stranger's voice through a blind approach in the rain. What she knew was how to stay calm when everything around her was falling apart, and how to keep working the problem in front of her instead of the fear underneath it. Sometimes that's the only qualification that actually matters. At 35,000 feet, everyone wears the same seatbelt. But it's the ones who answer the call button they never wanted to press who remind us what courage actually looks like. Not the absence of fear, but the choice to act anyway. If this story moved you, hit subscribe. There's always another flight, and always someone quietly capable of more than anyone around them realizes.